What is up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Eat, Train, Prosper. Today is Bryan and myself, and today's episode is literally over a year in the making. Today's episode is the recap into my best physique ever, which I guess I technically currently have right now. But to give a little bit of a preface of the episode, about a year ago, I reached out, hired a coach in Jackson, Pias, and said, "Hey, this is my year-long due. Would you like to provide help in terms of coaching with that?" He said yes, and we went through a big, approximately 6-month gaining period, and then an approximate 6-month diet, which leads us to where we are here today. And we're going to talk about it, talk about the body weights that I was at, what macronutrients looked like at those body weights, what changes we made going up, what changes we made going down, some notable points from my end, and then we'll recap with any questions and stuff that Bryan has as we kind of go through that. But as always, Bryan, can you kick us off with some updates, please?
Yeah, I'm excited for this episode. But first, I owe everybody an update on the news that I dropped last week. So for anyone that missed it, basically, I read the book Dopamine Nation. It inspired me to take a 30-day dopamine fast, as it's called, which means your substance of choice, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, sex, social media, whatever it is, you decide to abstain from that for 30 days. For me, that's marijuana. I noted in the last episode that the first 7 days were quite challenging for me, and I experienced a number of negative withdrawal effects that I didn't expect. Since that point in this last week, I've absolutely turned a corner. I am now entering day 16 as I speak today, as it is January 16th. And I feel great for the most part. I day 11, 12, and 15 were fantastic. Really good energy, incredible focus, really good sleep, appetite came back, all that good stuff. I had a couple down days on day 13 and 14. And I think that it was honestly, I took a trip to San Diego. And I think coming back from San Diego, where it was 65 degrees and sunny, and entering Boulder, where it was -10 for 3 straight days, I actually don't think it had anything to do with the marijuana. And I think it had everything to do with the weather and my body just not adjusting properly to the extreme cold. Because when I left Boulder, it wasn't that cold. And then I went to San Diego where it was beautiful. And I came back and it was really, really cold here and gray and stuff like that. So I had those 2 down days, not really making too much of it. But overall, sleep has been amazing. I've been getting some of the best sleep of my life. I've even had a couple nights where I only woke up once. And I don't know, for anyone that follows the podcast, you've heard that for like 20 years, I've been waking up 2 times a night, most nights. So I've had a few nights where I've only woken up once. My dreams that I said fell into the horror genre in the last episode as I was kind of having REM rebound. Those have corrected. And now my dreams are actually as lucid as ever, but not in the horror genre. So it's kind of exciting. I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen while I sleep tonight. It's like kind of playing in a movie or something like that. So dreams have been cool. And yeah, I mean, I guess there's still like a small desire to consume that hits me every now and then for certain situations, certain things that I do that, inspire me where I used to do it or whatever. But overall, the cravings aren't really there. And I would say the one thing that I probably will want to update as we go forward is in the book, it talks about how days 10 through 20, there's kind of a bit of a reflection period where sometimes people feel purposeless or they question their purpose. And I've experienced a little bit of that. And it's been insightful. So I don't really want to talk too much about it right now, maybe something for a future episode. But I have kind of had some thoughts and potential realizations about my future. So anyways, things are all good in that regard. I have another 15 days to go here, and I don't foresee it being an issue at all. In fact, I kind of expect things to just continuously get better and better. Second update, I did go to San Diego. That was a business trip. We did a bunch of video filming. It was great. I went back to Pacific Beach where Aaron and I used to hang out at the CrossFit gym. And I stayed in a little cottage right by the beach. I took a, barefoot walk along the sand. It was amazing. Got some good quality time with my business partner, Lori. And then as far as training goes, I had mentioned in the last episode that I had kind of foregone my final week of my prior cycle and jumped early into my Intelligent Bro Split program. And so now I've entered, I guess you'd call it week 2. I'm kind of officially calling it week 1 because the first week was more of what I'd call like a trial week as I was kind of dealing with the withdrawal symptoms and stuff like that. But the beginning of week 2 has been amazing. Progression is there and seamless and easy. And I've been getting sore, which is, I think, my favorite thing so far. And I know we don't like to look at soreness as something that we want to say, oh, if I'm not sore, training's not working or anything like that. But when I was training twice a week per muscle group with, 4 to 6 sets per session, I almost never got sore except in my quads or hamstrings. And since switching to this bro split and doing 7 to 11 sets per session per muscle group, I've been getting sore for the next few days afterwards. And that's felt really nice. So for whatever that's worth, I'm an OG bro at heart anyways, and being sore is something that feels nice. So those are my updates. Aaron, what's going on with you, bud?
So I will start my first update off with I achieved my goal, right? I kind of, like I opened in the introduction to this episode, with this big kind of, it was really like a hypothetical goal. It was, hey, I've been training for what's coming up on 20 years. I want to see if I give it a year, if I focus on the 1%ers, right? The things that we typically are tell not to focus on. If I focus on those for an entire year, what happens? Is there tangible improvement, right? I'm very pumped to say that there has been, right? And it has been cool. And I did achieve the goal. I stuck to it for an entire year, minus 2 trips that I took, which were still very, very directional, and a few times getting sick there. Now, something that I'll run through my updates quickly. We've talked about on the podcast before how you and I are mediocre to mediocre plus, like kind of sleepers in general. At the end of the diet, maybe like the last like 6 to 8 weeks, I was sleeping like amazingly. Like, I'm like, wow, this is what it's like to be like a real sleeper. I would sleep like literally through the night, not getting up to pee. I would be exhausted at 9 p.m. and like ready to go to bed. And it was actually quite nice. Unfortunately, now I'm effectively, which is I think this would be the start of my 4th week of the reverse diet out. My sleep is back to being a very moderate 7 out of 10. Waking up, to pee in the middle of the night, not really being tired at 10 p.m. And even lately, I've been waking up kind of early. Like, I've been getting up at 5:30, but I'll wake up at like 4, kind of ready to go, and be like, okay, I could start my day. It's probably like 10 minutes before my alarm, and I'm still like an hour and a half. So that sucks. I don't like it. I wish the sleep would come back from the end of the diet, because it was like I was sleeping good. It felt really, really nice. So I just thought that was kind of funny.
Why do you think that more calories have impacted sleep negatively? Because I think the common perception is that dieting inhibits sleep and that calories help sleep.
I think I was just so wiped out, like post training and stuff, because food was low. Like, I would come home from training, I would have, I'd still have, I guess technically 3 meals, but they were all protein, veg, and then like a shake to cap off the end of the night. And I was just wiped out from training, like training into, and I think that's really what it was. I was just exhausted. My body was exhausted. I was even having a hard time like working at night, like a very hard time working at night, because I would just be so tired that I think it was just like I was just maxed out, and sleep was like needed.
Gotcha. Is your pre-sleep hygiene good?
I mean, no. Like, let's face it. We'll record this podcast until after 10 p.m. my time. I will then go eat my final meal, probably get back to like a client or two or some leftover messages, and then try and go straight to bed at like 10:45 or something. So yeah. I think that was another thing. Now that I'm able to work again, now that I have like the energy and mental capacity to work again after training, I'm at my computer till I've been trying to shut it down at like 9:15, 9:30, but regularly it'll be like a fuck, it's 9:30. Let me try and finish this up, sort of thing. But I think that does play a role in it. My sleep hygiene was better because I was so exhausted. Like I couldn't come to work at night.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense. Have you tried blue light blockers at night?
I did. I had a pair. I do not know where they must have got lost in one of the moves or something, but I haven't had them in probably a year or more.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that was a kind of a side update. Yesterday marked 4 years of no alcohol for me, which I thought was
Nice.
your, I guess, abstinence update reminded me of that. So that's been very interesting. Who would have thought from the days of us in the mean streets of Pacific Beach, California, that Aaron would be effectively sober, I guess we could call it. That's quite funny, but here we are. And then the last quick update, new business launch this week, Undefeated Nutrition, which is kind of a sister company of the Undefeated Gym here that we have going on in Bali. So our first product is a toasted coconut flavor cream of rice that made its debut at the Undefeated Pro Camp that's going on right now. And very, very good response so far. So that's really, really fun.
So I have to be honest and say I have never in my entire life had cream of rice. What is it? It's like rice that's watery, or like, I mean, what, can you explain cream of rice to me?
It's kind of like take oatmeal, right? Like an oatmeal consistency, but made from like a powdered rice or a granulated rice. So it's you would cook it in a very, very similar way, but the fiber is significantly lower, so it will digest and clear your GI much faster. You can eat it in very large quantities rather simply, again with a low fiber content, which again clears the GI really, really well. So it's like wonderful pre-workout, post-workout. Oats without fiber, more or less, but not oats. It's rice-based.
Interesting. Cool.
And I think that's it for my updates.
All right, let's learn about your best physique ever.
Yeah. So to kind of kick off the first part of it, which was the build, and the real, let me back up here a little bit. The real reason I wanted to do this episode is to share how simple big changes can really be when you are ruthlessly consistent at them. I think over this entire year-long periodization, I think we have like food gets adjusted maybe 6 times, 7 times over an entire year. Like it really was that simple, but I was ruthlessly consistent over that entire year period. So January 1st, 2023, I started that year at 198.7 pounds, right? That is day one of what ended up being a 27-week gaining period. Not 6 weeks, not 8 weeks, right? At an advanced training age, and I could say, I guess, an advanced body composition, minimal changes are going to happen in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks, unless your food is so high that you're just putting on body fat rather quickly, which is obviously the opposite of what you want. Throughout the entirety of the build, those 27 weeks, I had one cardio session per week, which was a sprint 8 workout on the assault bike consisting of 30 seconds. My God, not 90 seconds. 30 seconds of a work pace all out sprint, 90 seconds recovery. It was easily the hardest session of the week, but we kept that in there while food was going up from just a pure health and cardiovascular standpoint. I also had one weekly free meal, which 9.9 out of 10 times ended up being sushi on Saturday nights. What we started the build at was 3175, so 3,175 calories, protein at 250, carb at 420, and fat at 55. And what I will say is largely, except for the exception of the latter part of the gaining phase, protein and fat more or less stayed approximately the same.
I feel like that's pretty standard for most gaining phases. Like you don't really need to manipulate that macronutrient too much. Real quick, just to jump in, would you say that was a how much surplus over your maintenance? You said 3175 was the number.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. Maybe 200 or 300 calories. Like maintenance is so dynamic. And one of the
Right.
things here in Bali, you don't walk a lot unless you're like going to go down to the beach and walk on the beach, which like I'm just not going to fucking do. Right. I just don't do it often. So there's no sidewalks. Going on walks is a challenge. You're in the way, you're in the road pretty much. I just don't do it often. So my,
Yeah.
Maintenance calories would be a little bit lower due to my lack of,
Movement.
non-activity specific,
Yeah.
exercise expenditure.
Well, you could probably figure that out by backtracking and looking at rate of gain, right? So you would assume like, if you're gaining half a pound a week, 2 pounds a month, then it's got to be about 250 calories or so above maintenance, right?
Yeah. And what I think is a really good way to answer this is the first adjustment we made to the diet was at week 4, where I was 200.8. And I'm using my averages from those weeks. I feel like that's the most appropriate way. 200.8. So we started, day 1 at 198.7. So we're up effectively up
2.1 or 3.1. Wait, what was the
200.8? 2 pounds.
2.1 pounds.
2.1.
Yeah.
2.1 pounds, right? In 4 weeks. And that's with knowing in that first week, like there's going to be glycogen compensation, your increase in gut contents and those sorts of things. So you do get some like an acute kind of uptick to what is now your essentially new baseline as you're filling out. But in week 4, body weight was moving quite slow. So we bumped carbs another 25 to 425, 445. I lied. So carbs went from 420 to 445. So a bump of 25, which is effectively 100 calories, right? And that was enough of an increase to then ride out another 10 weeks until I was 209.6 pounds. So that slight 100 calorie increase was enough to really shift the dials in terms of getting things moving. But another important caveat that I want to point out was my training intensity had really started ramping, right? I had really found a groove. And I know we had talked about this in earlier episodes of the podcast around, there was just a lot of intensity. Everything was pretty much being taken to failure. There were drop sets on the hack squat and those sorts of things. So I don't want to downplay the increase in reps performed directly to and in very, very close proximity to failure that I think was also a catalyst there.
For inflammation as well. But either way, like 9 pounds in 10 weeks is a large improvement. I mean, that's from those 100 calories. It almost makes you think, because the 100 calories in theory, when you look at like that's 700 calories a week. That shouldn't have been such a large bump. So yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's possible, you're gaining some muscle along the way too. Like there's a number of factors that go into that, but that is interesting that 100 calories per day got you going to the point where you were basically gaining a pound a week at that point.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing there is like, I mean, we had at this point, I was identical weekly photos, at the same time on Sundays in the same spot in the house and that sort of thing. Like body composition was holding very, very nicely through like the 210. So that's why the rate of gain was fast, but but photos look pretty damn good, and at that point, subjectively, I still felt pretty decently lean. And I remember talking about like, this is the best and leanest I've ever been at 210 there. Any questions yet?
No, I guess my only one thus far is that I thought for some reason, and I could be wrong because it's been a long year, that you were doing some of the more steady state cardio during parts of the gaining phase. Maybe that's still yet to come.
That didn't come until July, which is like maybe like a week before the diet changed over.
Interesting.
Before
So it was really just that one session of intensity on the assault bike.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. So, and then at week 14, what we did is fats got bumped from 55 to 70. So they went up there. And then if I remember correctly, I was having some digestive issues at that point and just being like really, really full. and uncomfortable. And that's, I think, why we bumped the fats up. I think a salmon meal came in at the end of the night, like a little bit of like salmon and avocado. And that was at week 14 of the gain, where I was right about that 210. During weeks 17 through 20, I was back in the States, was in Colorado, Virginia, I think Colorado and Virginia. And I did not make any progress. My weight actually regressed there.
I remember you said that you had 2 days where you walked like 30,000 steps, like 2 straight days or something like that.
That
Or was
was
that, no, that was a trip to Asia, maybe.
No, that was on the way back home to Bali. I made a stop in Hong Kong for 3 days. And yeah, and I just couldn't eat enough there and was walking so much. But even before that, my weight was sliding over those weeks back in the States.
Is that because you think that you just didn't have your routine, your meals? Like, I know you're not a guy that's going to go off the charts and eat some like quote unhealthy foods just to get calories. So you were still trying to eat clean, but as we know, it's very tough to bulk on extremely clean foods, especially as the bulk goes on.
That and a lot of moving pieces, right? We're in like one Airbnb for a couple days and then moving that amount of food. And then we're flying from, Denver back to Virginia. There was a wedding in there somewhere too. It was just a lot. And I mean, that's actually really good to talk about. That was the trip where I realized afterwards, and I had a sit down with Jenny and was like, I don't want to travel like this anymore because it's too hard to manage, while I still have like goals that require me to have to bully the situations. And unless I can bully these travel situations, I just kind of don't want to go, and it was pretty eye opening because I felt there were a lot of good to the trip, seeing friends. I got to see my mom and my sister and those sorts of things, which don't happen frequently anymore. But I remember just having like this low grade, frustration, like I'm just burning these weeks and not making any progress, and trying to train at different gyms, that equipment's different. It's never going to, you're not going to have the best session. You might put together like a B- session. And I'm just of the belief like a B- session at this stage of the game, is not going to move the needle forward, So
Yeah.
From that point, I just got kind of frustrated.
So yeah, I feel you. I guess to help the listeners, because we do have people that probably have to travel for whatever reason and can't just sit in their home gym with their home food all the time. What do you think you could advise practically for people that are trying to follow suit and continue to progress in a surplus while also having all of this kind of unexpected travel?
Try to keep your structure the same. And what I mean by that structure is I eat 4 times per day or whatever that might be. I'm not saying four. I do like to use the example of 4 because I do feel like it's a good best of all worlds sort of thing that's typically attainable for most. Try to recreate that structure, right? In wherever you go. For people who travel frequently for work, there are chains of gyms. Like I know people will keep a Planet Fitness membership because you kind of know because it's in a chain, you kind of know what you're going to get when you go into the different gyms. They should have similar equipment, those sorts of things. Packing and traveling with some of your food, like protein powder. There's no reason not to travel with it. And then one that I use with clients sometimes this works really well if you are maybe like a regional salesperson who travels frequently to the same places. Have meal prep delivered to your hotel before you get there. That's one that I'll use with clients. It works out really, really well when you're, I would say, more committed than average to adhering.
Cool. Good advice.
Okay. So I am back from the USA and Hong Kong travel, and I got sick, I remember, and had a week of Bali belly. So that was a very late April, May was like a solid 6-ish week period where I didn't have much progress. And that was quite frustrating. And then in week 24, right? So heads up or just a reminder, week 17 through about 22 were pretty much non-progress weeks. Week 24, we made a protein source change, which bumped protein ever so slightly up, like another 5 grams. I think at this point I was really over salmon and avocado, and was like, I can't fucking have any more salmon and avocado. I will not eat it anymore. That
What's
was
your
like the
body
only,
weight at this point? Because you left for the trip probably at like 210, right? Maybe 211, something like that.
yep. Yep. Let me look. I have it up so I can look really quickly.
Because you probably lost a little bit of weight over those few weeks where you traveled. Then you had the Bali belly, which I'm guessing you dropped a ton of weight, but it probably then came back relatively quickly once you got over the sickness and started eating again.
Yeah. So I left actually the week before the USA trip. I was 210.0 on the dot. And the week I got back, 208.9. And that was after a full week back in Bali.
With the sickness, like after the
With
sickness.
this, yep, with the sickness, 208.9. And so then it was the second week of June before I had another progress week into the 211. So from, let's call that literally the final week of April to the second week of June, I didn't have any progress.
Okay. Yeah, that's frustrating when you're
That was,
goal oriented like that.
yeah. So it was quite frustrating. And then also, I guess for the listeners, like I'm someone where I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard for me to put on weight, but like with how my hunger and in satiety cues and stuff are, like if left to my own devices without tracking food, like I'll just kind of slowly lose weight. I'm never that hungry, and that could be just maybe some genetics with like leptin signaling or something like that. But that's always kind of been that way my entire life. And any times that I've been like 205 or plus, like I'm eating kind of outrageously to maintain those higher body weights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just real quick to jump in because it made
Yeah.
me think of something with my experience. I almost wonder whether I've been using weed partially as a bodybuilding supplement to help my appetite because like I say my appetite has come back now, but when I say my appetite has come back, I'm not eating as much as I was when I was consuming weed, and I still can't seem to get my body weight out of the 180s now. Like I've gotten it from 187 back to 188, and then it's like stuck at 188. And I just literally, I'm like you, I'm now having trouble like eating enough food without feeling like I'm force feeding myself. And so it just kind of sparked that in my mind. I wonder, if in some cases, like, hey, weed can be a bodybuilding supplement because it actually helps you consume more food.
Yeah. No, I've seen things, I can't recall numerous years ago, but like appetite help stuff for bodybuilding, and like marijuana was definitely on that list.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay, so we are now into like middle of June, and then I was very, very refocused. Training was ramped back up, and then weight started coming on pretty decently again. So I had that 211 second week of June, and then by July 15th, I had my peak weigh-in, which was 217.1, which
Wow.
put me at a 215.x average for that week. I don't have that specific number marked down, but it was a 215.x. This marked the end of the build, and some kind of stats there. 18.4 pounds were added from January 1st to July 15th, or a total body mass increase of 9.3%. A little aside here, very often with clients, I like to speak in terms of setting goals in terms of relative increases and decreases in total body mass. So if we're going on like a gain phase and someone's like, oh, I think I want to gain some muscle, and then they give me this target that's like a 2.5% increase in total body mass, I'm like, I will typically say, like, listen, that's not enough body weight to actually change anything once you diet. That's like the people who are like, I want to gain, and then they put on a little bit of body fat, and they're like, I don't think this is a good idea. I want to lose, and then you just spent 4 months doing a fake out build lose to just remain the exact same spot you were at when you started the initial one. So
Right.
you have to commit to at least enough, I would say absolute bare minimum, a 5% a 5% delta, either north or south of a total body mass delta to have some amount of a tangible change in body composition.
Yep. I agree with that.
Cool. Yeah. Typically around 10% is quite notable, especially on the calorie deficit side. I would say that 10% threshold for my more like Gen Pop clients, people who just want to lose a little bit of the gut or feel like themselves again or something like that. That's about that threshold where clients are typically pretty stoked, but don't really care to get leaner. And using an example there, that's like a 200-pound male going to, 180 pounds. So
Yeah.
20 pounds at that level, it's approximately a 10% decrease in total body mass.
I was literally just about to say the same thing as I was doing that math in my head, and I was thinking about my diets and where I usually start and where I end. It's usually somewhere around 200 pounds and it's somewhere around 180 pounds. And that seems to be kind of where I move between.
Yep. Okay. Any questions about the gain in that side of things?
I think you covered it pretty well. I guess my only question would just be subjective sense of wellness at the top of the gain.
I think because I was doing the cardio, I was surprised at my work capacity, and I had like, I remember like, it wasn't, it was not a rest pause set on the hack squat, but I had like a very, very gnarly, like high rep back off set with a drop set, which was very cardiovascularly like taxing. But I remember feeling like, I think this was, I don't think I could say it was the best shape of my life at that weight, because I competed at the CrossFit regionals at 217, and I was objectively in much more cardiovascularly better shape back then. But better than another time I was that heavy. I didn't feel like I didn't feel like quite lethargic or really anything. My clothes were super tight and like my ass was eating all of my shorts and that sort of thing. But I didn't feel like the extra weight on my body really in a negative perception.
Right. I'm sure. Yeah, you looked fine. I mean, as far as I could tell. But the sleep. So sleep was no good at the top of that, I would assume, given your earlier statements.
It was about my Aaron baseline, and that's I would say like a 6.5 out of 10. And what I will say there, it's very unfortunately with me, the quality of my sleep is very environment dependent. I'm a very, very light and sound sensitive sleeper. So we, at our previous villa there, we were like much closer to kind of like the center of town. The windows weren't, double sealed and that sort of thing. Like we were close to the road. So like cars would go by, because it was like a Bali villa sort of thing. Like the air con wouldn't stay at 18 degrees, because there was like the bathroom had like, I don't even know the proper terminology. Like it wasn't completely sealed. So there'd be like holes in part of like the shower where like the AC would just like go out. So it couldn't get really that cold. And like those sorts of things massively impact my sleep. Like you give me blackout room, 65 on the AC, and it's quiet, and like I can sleep pretty well. But like without those constants, my sleep quality can suffer quite large.
Yeah, interesting. And then last question on it is just, where do you think your average steps were throughout the end of that gaining phase?
Let's have a look. So the under 5,000, 4,700. We have a 5,100 the previous week. The week before that was a 5,800. So right around the 5,000s.
Okay.
So quite nothing special, really.
Yeah, it's pretty standard, like not really doing any movement aside from daily moving around the house and grocery shopping and whatever else.
And walking around the gym. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. So now with the week 1 of the diet, just to give a little bit of a recap, I ended the gain at approximately 3,400 calories. And I should actually back up and say all of these targets that I'm given are my prescribed calories. That weekly sushi free meal would push me above all of these. So you could think of each of these numbers as an actual minimum. It will, for example, here we go. In week 1 of the diet, The only adjustment was the fats got reduced by 20 from 70 to 50, and my carbs went from 445 to 385. So a reduction of
60.
There you go. Right. Not a good math setup for me there. However, realistically, carbs were, with that sushi free meal, probably closer to an average of 400 or higher. And we can expect probably 200, maybe about an extra 100 calories or so with that big sushi meal. Now, here is something that I think really was the kicker with my diet this year and why food was able to stay so high. In week 2 of my diet, we started the inklings of Bali training camp, right? Jackson and I started training together, and cardio went to 3 sessions per week. We removed the HIIT session and it went into like spin bike sessions with a couple intervals in there we were doing. And then the sauna got added daily. And then my training time went from about 1.5 hours to 2 hours. With it would either be, 2 of us or 3 of us. So rest times were very often a minimum of like 5 minutes per set. So that first we ran that for 4 weeks, right? Or 5 weeks, I should say. The first adjustment of the diet came in at week 5, and I was down to 211.5. And what we did there is pulled 50 grams of carbs back to 335. So from the 385 to 335. Now, what I will say is I do remember this diet, my weight being a little bit more sticky than I had experienced in the past. I remember previous times where I was at this heavier body weight, the second food came down, my body would just start like pissing off weight. That didn't actually happen this time. I was quite surprised. I stuck around the 313 or the 213s, the 212s, like for a little bit more than I expected, to be completely honest. And then that ran us through 12 weeks at that macronutrient count. Things started rolling, right? I think it was the additional cardio sessions, the increase in the training duration, just overall energy expenditure, being at the gym longer, doing more volume, doing more sets, now starting to spot people, which is, it's minuscule, but it does add up when you're just doing more activity for longer.
Yeah. So you, just to take a step back and get everyone caught up here. So your carbs dropped from a peak of 445 to what is now 335. So they dropped 110 per day, which would be 440 calories. And then your fat dropped 20 grams a day from 70 to 50. So that's 180 calories. So you're looking at 620 calorie delta with protein staying the same.
Correct.
So 620 calories down, plus you're doing additional cardio, plus you're doing sauna, which has an increased heart rate. So there's a non-nominal caloric expenditure from that as well. The cardio went from 1 HIIT session. And did you up cardio throughout the diet, or was it the same like 3 or 4 times a week throughout the entire thing?
So it stayed the same at 3 or 4. So what it ended up being is we were on a 12-day cycle. So most days we ended up lifting 4 times per week, and then 3 cardio sessions. Sometimes it would be slightly off, where maybe I only got 3 in on the rare occasion, or an even rarer occasion as we trained 5 days in a week.
Yeah. So if we're talking 600 plus calories of food delta from where you were on the bulk, and then call it 200 calories a day average, because your cardio sessions probably burn more than 200 calories. So 200 calories per day average, maybe we're looking at about an 800 calorie delta from where you were on the bulk. So you finished the bulk around 34 something. So we're in theory thinking about the total number being 2,600, not that you're eating 2,600, you're probably eating 2,800, but then there's the delta from the cardio as well.
Spot on. Exactly.
Cool.
Yep. Really good insight there in terms of just the delta in overall caloric delta. Yep. So was able to run that for a very, very long time, for 12 weeks. Something happened at the end of September. I don't really remember specifically, but ended up taking a full 3-day deload of no training. Food was high all 3 days. I think I was just like redlining a little bit. So
We
I think it
talked
was,
about this. I remember we talked about it on the podcast, and I was like, sounds to me like you need a deload.
yeah. So I think I was redlining for a couple weeks and just telling myself like that things were fine and I was good. And then that's where I think I hit that point where I remember being like really just not unhappy, but what's that? It's like that anhedonia feeling where it's just like I would look outside to like these beautiful rice fields in Bali and like the wind blows and it's beautiful. It's like one of my favorite things about Bali. And I remember like looking at it one day and seeing it and literally going to myself like I don't give a fuck about this. And like that's when I knew like that was my favorite thing about being here is that those views and just
Yeah,
being like
yeah.
I don't care about this at all. And I was like okay, something's off. Like I don't feel like I was like I think I'm just run down. So we increased food I think like 200 calories or sorry 200 carbs per day for like 3 consecutive days, and I didn't go to the gym and just like took 3 full days off, and that's exactly what I needed. I felt right back to normal after that, which was quite nice.
Awesome.
um and then the which is technically this only the second adjustment of the diet in week 17. I was now at 198.9 pounds. So effectively right about back at the weight I started at on January 1st. We pulled another 50 grams of carbs off to 285 grams of carbs, which now put me at about 2550 calories prescription, and protein and fat remained the same.
So we're now at about 1,000 calorie delta from peak bulk when you count the cardio.
Yep. And at this point, right around a week, maybe 2 weeks after this, I was bumping up against that red line rather quickly. So Jackson added a midweek refeed of an extra 200 grams of carbs. And that would be either Tuesday or Wednesday, or sorry, Wednesday or Thursday, depending on whatever one of those days was a training day.
Yep.
And then if it could go on like a leg day or a push day, I would preferentially choose that day because those are the tougher days, or the push days are the days that typically suffer the most in terms of training performance once you get a
Yep.
certain level of lean.
So that's 800 total calories that you add, which essentially spread across a week is an average of 100 calories a day. So that changes that delta back to about 900 calories below peak bulk.
Yep. And then we ran that protocol from week 17 was the final adjustment. I believe 18 or 19. I couldn't find in my notes when that actual second refeed of the day or the second refeed day of the week came in. I think somewhere around maybe week 18 or 19. And we ran that right up until week 24, which was the final week of the diet. And the only difference there was no sushi meal on the Saturday and no midweek high day with the refeed of 200 grams. So just a straight 240 protein, 285 carb, 50 for 7 days. And then my final average weight at the end of that final diet week was 191.9.
Wow. Yeah. So you dropped like 26 pounds from peak weight to where you ended up at the end of the diet. And it's about the same number where you were the year prior when you were talking on the podcast about how bummed you were, where you feel like you wasted a year and you didn't look any better at 191 than you did the prior year. And then you get back to 191 again after going through the whole 6 months up, 6 months down, and boom, you have your best physique ever.
Yeah. I posted, if for anyone listening to this, if you go to my Instagram, I posted a 1-to-1 of the last year's diet, or I guess technically 22 years ago, 2022, which Bryan just alluded to, where I was quite bummed with those results. Couldn't have been a different story at that weight this year. Like definitely the leanest I've ever been. So, I mean, I don't think I could realistically say significant improvements in my physique. Improvements, right? There's no 10 pounds new muscle or anything like that. It's just like at 191 again, I'm just significantly leaner, which therefore alludes to we have more muscle mass sort of thing. It might be maybe 2 pounds or something like that,
Yeah.
maybe 3,
I was going to
absolute
say
max.
2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the reality. And then just to kind of close the loop, week 25, we started my reverse diet, and what we did there is add 90 grams of carbs. So we went from 285 to 375 for that first week. And my average weight did not change at all. I had the exact same average weight after 7 days. And then weeks 2 and 3 of the reverse, we only bumped carbs 400 because I was going to have a photo shoot at the end of the third week of the reverse. So we just kept things constant there from simplicity standpoint. And I actually think I forgot to pull that weight, but I think I can do it here. But this most recent, so I don't have an average of week 3, but I do have an average of week 4, which is this week that we just wrapped up that ended at January 14th. And my average was 191.7. So it actually went down, with carbs going up to 400 for 2 weeks. And then this week, which is effectively as of today or yesterday, January 15th, carbs are at 470. So up from the 285 that we ended the diet at, almost 200 grams of extra carbs daily. And my body weight was I don't remember, still very low, 192s or something like that. So yeah. They're not sticking yet is the kind of joke we say with the carbohydrates are still just running through me.
Yeah. I think
I'm digesting
a lot of that,
but
yeah, I think that can be attributed to there just being that delayed almost whoosh effect of your diet where you went so hard that last week of the diet where you cut out the sushi meal, you cut out some more of something, like you ended up basically plummeting the total amount of food you were consuming. So I would guess that whoosh effect probably didn't take place till like 7 to 14 days after you actually started eating more food. So that doesn't really like surprise me at all, to be honest. And you're up a pound now, so it seems like it's starting to happen. It just is. You just had that delayed effect there.
Yeah, and this is like one. I want to say like I'm in the honeymoon phase, right? Diet's over. I'm still shredded. Food's literally more than I actually even care to eat right now. And like most of the negative adaptations associated with getting really lean have improved. I'm in full transparency. Libido is still completely gone. That is one that has not come back yet. But other than that, like training performance has last week flipped so fast that I was, or to such a degree that I was like looking at my notes being like, this can't be right. Like there's no way this is what I did last week, because like I had a note from like the pull days. I will say pull sessions progressed throughout the entirety of the diet, which was really,
as they
really
tend
cool.
to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm literally doing, and one thing that's really cool is our training program hasn't changed since before the diet started. So I have literally the exact same data, the exact same workouts from like June, end of June and early July, where I'm doing like whatever 80 pounds on like the pull down for 8 reps. And now I'm at like 99 pounds for 9 reps, on the same equipment and that sort of thing. And that's like really, really cool. Pressing progressions dried up. Leg stuff was hit or miss. There'd be like some days I would like geek out a rep or two, but pull was able to progress. And now with the food back in, I had a note where, okay, I work in rep ranges, right? Okay. Once I hit 9, I increase load. Last week I hit my 9 after working at that weight a couple weeks. I'm like, cool. I increase load. I drop down to the next pin on the pull down, and I hit 9 reps again. So it's like I cleared that in 1 week, and I'll go up again next week. So like those things it's fun I love numbers go up season, So after after dieting and them being like not really going up or very, very slowly, it's going to be fun for those to happen again.
Yep. That is really typical. I mean, I think that experience of pressing numbers and leg numbers, well, pressing numbers, either going backwards or barely hanging on is something that's typical. Leg numbers kind of oscillating up and down depending on the week is also quite typical, I've found. And then pulling numbers, yeah, for whatever reason, I don't know why pulling numbers continue to do okay in a diet. Part of me wonders whether there's some form compensation that's occurring like so subtly that you almost can't tell because pulling movements are so subject to teeny little bits of body English. But it is weird in that pulling numbers do tend to not suffer nearly as bad as the pressing numbers. So I don't exactly know why that is, but it does seem to be a pretty ubiquitous experience across lifters.
Yeah.
And so what is the plan now? I mean, you're obviously reversing out, but what does the next, 16, 20 weeks look like?
So I got lab work. Was it today?
That's what you posted on your story today.
Okay. Today. Yeah, man. Today I got a big end of diet lab work done. And I was planning on, or not, I was planning on, I will be transparent about this like throughout the entirety of it. I just didn't necessarily plan to talk about it on today's episode, but sure, why not? The big change is I'm going on TRT. That is the kind of big, I guess the largest added wrinkle. This is something that I've known about for almost 2 years now, and it was part of this entire year-long plan to say, hey, I've been training for 20 years. I want to find what's left for me to obtain naturally at 35 years old. And then when that is over, I'm going to go on TRT. That's something, like I just said, I've known I would do this for about 2 years. I have been up and down rabbit holes with it, as I would say, in just, again, in full transparency, as I always like to be, about 20%, maybe 25% of my male clients come to me on TRT already. That number is increasing and people are getting younger. So it's something that I've had to really learn about professionally, because a lot of I should say, I cannot necessarily say a lot. Many of the clinics are quite lackluster in their approaches and very cookie cutter. So it's something that I just had to learn about to be able to help my nutrition clients, better. And after speaking with a number of them, it was something that I talked obviously with like Jenny and those sorts of things, and decided that I would be moving forward with. So that is the next big wrinkle. And then food is just coming up, right? Training is going to pretty much stay the same. I'm moving into a support role as Jackson is now in prep. So his food's coming down. Another one of our training partners, Cade, is in prep as well. His food's coming down. My food is coming up. So I'll kind of slot into the leadership role of carrying the energy and stuff through the training session. So that's kind of my big thing. I'm excited for just progressions to come again, which they will, by way of food coming in and exogenous testosterone coming in, and focus on business stuff, I would say.
Yeah. Cool. I'm curious to see what your testosterone levels come back at now before you go on TRT. That'll be interesting to see what that delta is once you get on TRT and what changes.
Yeah.
And then my other question is, do you think there is any chance that this venture into TRT then progresses into additional exogenous testosterone supplementation?
That is the next thing in the air. The invitation is there for me. I have to decide around what my goals really are. This entire last like 5-6 months has been a very, very eye-opening experience for me. And I think that I haven't really had the time to sit down and think about it, but it's been really eye-opening as I've trained with pretty much everyone that we've trained with, besides Brandon Kempter, right? Who's a massive, we've wonderful natural. We've had him on the podcast. He's a genetic, he's a phenom, right? His work ethic, he's strong as all fuck. Aside from Brandon, everyone is enhanced, right? On gear, on PEDs. I recover just as well. I can train just as hard. I'm obviously not as strong, but things have been very eye-opening, because things that I previously thought I can't do that because they're on PEDs and I'm not, I've lived through the experience of that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
So it has kind of, my ears have kind of peaked up where it's like, well, if I can do this, like, as, being natural now, past my prime at being about to be 36, like, do I have a run of one or two competitive seasons to see what might be like an unturned stone? So that's the kind of thoughts in my head right now. I have about 2 months to decide on what I will do before I will either continue just doing what I'm doing or go down, the proverbial dark side full time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I would love to see you step on a natural bodybuilding stage before you do that, because I think that your physique is of elite level for a natural bodybuilding show. And I think that you actually are, posing aside, I think you have the physique potential to achieve your pro card in like a WNBF or something like that. Given that I think you would be stepping on stage in the mid to high 180s, which is a pretty ridiculous amount of body weight to hold for a natural person at your height.
One thing that, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I have zero interest in competing in natural bodybuilding. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
I think it's so much harder. And I think it's the mental drain, the physical lulls and lows are so much more, because you have to get so lean and you can't deploy any of the fucking help that the, people who are on PEDs do. I just don't think I have it in me. Like we're having conversations with Brandon and stuff. And I mean, the preps are 40 weeks long, 45 weeks long. And there was a nail in the coffin in the thought of my mind there a couple months back at this point. It's maybe 2 or 3 months back. Brandon, who we see regularly, we train at the same gym and everything like that. Now, his business partner, I apologize, I don't remember his name. He put up a picture of 16 weeks out from his last show, right? At 16 weeks out, he is leaner than I am right now and still had 4 more months of dieting, right? Yeah. And it was then where I was like, no, I'm not interested in that, because it's the other impacts of, work that potentially suffers. We're talking what might end up be like, again, I'm very transparent. Libido's been gone for like 2 months, right? Imagine another 4 months on top of that, 6 months, right? Like those sorts of things. I respect the hell out of it. I want nothing to do with it.
Okay, one more question on this topic, because I know we'll probably address it in more detail once you make the decision or whatever. Thoughts around the idea that once you go there, you can't really come off without your physique plummeting and feeling like you are no longer at your peak physique?
Yeah, I think I've made the commitment mentally that if it's 2 to 3 times weekly injection, something that I need to do for the next 30 years, I feel like that's pretty a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. That is one, but I think I would go, I'd made the intention to, like, if once I start, like I'm on, unless I have some awful reaction or whatever within a couple weeks. And then it's pretty much within a couple weeks, it's nothing. You'll recover perfectly fine. So from that standpoint, like if I just continue to do what I'm already doing, things, based on the literature, will actually just get better with me doing no more additional work.
Right. And then you're 70 by the time you come off, and like, who really cares? Or if you ever even come off. Yeah.
And my thought process
I actually have,
my thought process is like, by the time I'm 70, there's probably going to be a simpler way to administer and maintain. That was a thought process.
All right. Now I have one more question.
Of course.
So the research seems to be mixed. And I've seen both positives and negatives as far as what TRT therapy will do to lipids, call it cholesterol, ApoB, triglycerides, stuff like that. And I know that you already have a proclivity for higher lipids in your blood. So thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I'm just going to look into, I shouldn't say look, I've already looked, right? So there's actually someone here, he's not in Bali, but he's in Indonesia. doctor here who's like very active in the like bodybuilding scene and being open around these are like safer use protocols and things like that. So from him, I've been learning about certain things like ezetimibe is a medication that is often used in parallel with statins or as like a monotherapy for people who do not handle statins well or do not want to go on statins, that has good research on LDL lowering. And there's a few other ones like a citrus bergamot, a berberine. So I think for me, that decision is now that it's something that I have to manage more. I'm going to manage more. So I'm just like, I got a full panel of lab work. I got my ApoB, I got my cystatin C. I got like a very good baseline of like, okay, this is exactly where I'm at the end of this diet where things should be, at an improved level because body fat is sub 10%. Things should be on paper very good from a lipid profile. My fats have been very, very low for a number of weeks. I'll have a true baseline and then I just get to see, I've always been someone that prefers to kind of find their own answers. And obviously the literature is wonderful for providing like averages and protocols and stuff to look into. But now it's like, okay, I'm on for 6 weeks. What do my lipids look like? Are they worse? Are they the same? Have they even improved? Right? We know from the literature that some men's lipid improves once a TRT comes. Typically, they're hypogonadal, however, when starting. But yeah, I feel confident in the amount of information I've sourced and in the studies and stuff that I've saved to navigate that, and I have literally professional resources at my disposal to help.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that's what I was saying about the literature. Like it is mixed, which I think is very interesting. Like you do see some people that get on it and it gets better and then others that it gets worse. Well, that's really interesting, really insightful. I'm actually kind of glad we took this detour at the end of the episode and that you opened up about that because I'm intrigued and I'm glad that you've been kind of an open book and, able to talk about it with everyone. So much like my marijuana journey has been an open book, it's cool to see this on the back end of the episode as well.
I think it's just the best way. I've always just wanted to be transparent. I really dislike the shadowiness of the lies and smoke and mirrors and stuff in the industry. And I don't see any benefit to it. Right. Yep. But what I'm excited about is like, I have my receipts, we took a bunch of pictures and stuff like that. And I'm going to have like, here are my labs. Here is this physique. Like, this is what I was able to do after like 20 years of training, of 6 years being a full-time, fitness professional at 35 years old. Like, this is what I was able to do. And now I'm good. I'm going to go do something else. Right. So,
Yeah, cool, man. Very interesting. Excited to follow the rest of that journey. And I think overall this episode has been super cool. And I'm really glad that we have this information out there for everyone to kind of digest and experience for themselves.
Yep. And I'm sure it'll spark some questions. So feel free to ask away. Guys, we'll be back next week talking
Instagram Q&A.
That's it. Instagram Q&A, my favorite episodes. So by the time this episode releases, those questions will have already been asked. This what I'm going to say right now isn't going to help. So we'll wrap this one up here. As always, thank you guys for listening. Bryan and I will talk to you next week.